Okay, y'all turn to Ephesians chapter 6. While y'all are turning there, I'd like to first congratulate James and Nina. Have another grandkid. Congratulations. And ask everybody to please keep, Angel has a family, sister-in-law. What's her name, Angel? Dory. She lives in Louisiana and was bitten by a snake and went for the anti-venom, and I guess is allergic to the anti-venom and is really having a hard time with it. Wound up in ICU, so y'all please keep her in your prayers. I suspect probably a moccasin, but I don't guess they know. Okay. All right, let's go to the Lord in prayer. Our Father, we come to you this morning thankful that you've given us this privilege and responsibility. The privilege of coming to you to worship, Lord, and the responsibility of doing it the way you've said. So we ask this morning that you give us of your Spirit to lead and guide us, that we might not only say and do things that are pleasing to you, but that we show love and unity in the body. In Christ's name we pray. Amen. All right, chapter 6, we're going to move on to the next section today. And the next section is going to be children obeying parents and slaves obeying masters. And we're not going to deal with slaves and masters much at all, because in all reality, we don't have that in our society. We'll talk about it some, but let's deal with the children and parents first, because we certainly have that. And I know of no greater thing in our society today that has broken down than the family. Can't we all agree? Satan has done a marvelous job attacking the family. And if you look at how cultures fall, a man wrote in 1921, when the divorce rate in our country reached 25%, he said our society was doomed to fail. That if 1 out of 4 marriages failed, that society would fail. Well, we're seeing it, aren't we? And all of us are guilty. All of us are, been raised this way. And so we've got to have our thinking changed. And I know of no greater change needed in any area than in the area of discipline. Look, we're not talking about being tyrants, but let's say it. Is not discipline something that's frowned on everywhere today? I mean, they don't think criminals ought to pay. They don't think, don't spank your children. And y'all know every part of society, and look at the effect it's had. I mean, it's breaking down, isn't it? It's cyclical in nature, and it's kind of, we're so involved in humanity that we don't tend to stand back and look at it. But every time I cut my grass, okay, I have the same thoughts while I'm cutting my grass. The lady that lived here before us had a professional, obviously, that had somebody doing it, huh, Ken? Yeah. And they had really nice centipede grass back there and St. Augustine up there, but they had somebody spraying it and spending a lot of time on it. Well, I don't. And what I notice is every time I cut it, I'm cutting more and more weeds, dollar weeds and other weeds. I'm losing the battle to the weeds, right? Y'all think about societies that way. What happens? Things creep in, and if you don't address them, what happens? They take over. And folks, that's because the earth is under the curse of sin. And what did God say? Thorns and thistles it will bring forth. Well, it's the same with people. We're born cursed and dead in sin. And if that's not addressed, what happens? Y'all see it. And I have a friend that told me once, I was talking about what's important, and he said he just wants to make sure that his kids can grow up and earn a good living where they can enjoy life. And I said, well, I honestly could care less. We only had Sienna at the time. I said, I could care less about what kind of living she makes. I want her to grow up to know the Lord and to be happy. And that's the most important thing, isn't it? But is that the thing that comes first today? Yeah. It certainly wasn't in my life the majority of my life. And I'm thankful to God that He didn't have me raising children at an earlier age, because I'd have ruined them. I would have absolutely just given them all the wrong, and nobody can go back. So let's nobody beat ourselves up, okay? What we're talking about here is how to address our current thinking moving forward. But discipline is not popular. Hey, y'all remember when they started to defund the police stuff in these big cities? Do you know what they said next? They didn't understand why crime was out of control. I mean, how dumb is that, right? It's the same where this friend told me. He said when it come to the Lord, his answer was, well, I would just rather let my kids make those decisions for themselves. And I said, have you ever planted a garden? He said, yes. And I said, well, next time you plant a garden, why don't you let it tend itself and see what you get? What will you get? Nothing. And that's the same, isn't it? Okay, so we're going to deal with this today, and let's really take our time with it. But The real problem comes here. It's a misunderstanding of discipline's true purpose. Now, there is a cyclical nature to society. We've all noticed it. Hey, there's a great example of this in England. Everyone's heard of the Elizabethan period, right? That was not the Elizabeth that just died. It was King Henry VIII's daughter. She was a believer, and the country came under Protestant biblical teaching. And what happened? The country began to reform, and things began to change. Well, what does that produce in the next generation? There's a little resentment towards it. There's a little falling away from it. And then that presents something else. And what you wound up with after that was you wound up with the Victorian age. Have anyone ever read much about the Victorian age? Brutal. Brutal. I mean, their kids were, you know, that's where the whole, we joke about you should be seen and not heard. You know, I tell Sienna, you ever hear that, seen and not heard, joking with her? But in the Victorian society, that was how it was. They were harsh on their children, and they believed in firm discipline. Well, what did that produce in the following generations? Rebellion. And y'all know it's cyclical. You watch it. And I've told y'all before, in the Bible you'll find this. You swing out into one heresy, and we don't correct ourselves. We overcorrect, don't we? I remember when I used to watch NASCAR. Do you know what's the #1 cause of every crash? Overcorrection. In other words, the car gets out, and instead of bringing it back, you overcorrect it. That's why cars flip on the interstate, isn't it? Somebody gets over on them, and instead of easing over, they jerk the wheel. Well, we tend to do that in things. And, you know, if you just look at your upbringing, you'll see what I mean. All right? Me and Gina, for instance, were raised in a situation where we did not have good discipline. We had discipline, but it wasn't good discipline, and it certainly wasn't biblical discipline. What did it cause us to do? It caused us to swing the other way, wouldn't you say, Gina? And it's natural. Chris wouldn't mind me using. Chris said he grew up with the great Santini. Everybody seen that movie before? With Robert Duvall? He was a military man, and he ruled his family like the military. Well, what did that cause Chris to want to do when you left the house, Chris? Rebel. And the idea here is what you've got to teach children, and all others too, but you've got to teach children the reason for discipline. It's not harsh. It's not that you're being mean. You do it in love, don't you? I try and tell Sienna, I told her I want her to pay real good attention today, because sometimes we'll tell her to do stuff and we get the, you know, and the bothers me. I'll tell her, do not roll your eyes at me. I don't like the eye roll, right? But I know what she's doing. Dina too, I can't tolerate the eye roll. But what the eye roll is the result of is she thinks what I'm telling her to do is harsh, unreasonable, or stupid. So I need to explain to her the reason why I'm telling her. It's like I told her this morning about chores. She has chores she has to do. And I said, did you been enjoying Little House on the Prairie? She said, yeah. I said, what kind of women did Mary and Laura turn into? Fine women. What were they doing all their life? Chores. Chores aren't punishment. Chores are teaching you responsibility. What chores are really doing is telling you, hey, you know what life really is most of the time? It's one long series of things that you prefer not to do, but you need to do. Isn't that what it is? It doesn't make it wrong, but if we don't teach our kids why we're doing something, all they'll want to do is do the opposite. And we see that, don't we? All right? Let's see. Y'all flip over, if you would, to Proverbs 13, just to start here. All right, in Proverbs 13, and we've got things like this all through the book of Proverbs. But remember what Proverbs is all about. Two kinds of wisdom, isn't it? The wisdom which comes from God and the wisdom which is of the world. And he suggests that we do exercise chastening. You know, everybody knows spare the rod, spoil the child. But how sometimes do we use that? Y'all know, I used to hear my dad say to his friends, he'll do it or he'll get such and such. Now, what that meant was, I'm so tough, look at me, nobody rebels against me. That's not how you discipline a kid. That's absolutely wrong. And you know, that never caused me. I can tell y'all that the way I was raised caused me not to love my father. You don't cause a child not to love you unless you do things to them. And I felt really bad about that. And my granny told me one time, she said, honey, a child feels about their adults the way the adult makes the child feel. And that's very true, isn't it? But everything is so upside down today. It's so out of proportion. When my mom and dad got divorced, it was a good thing that my mom got us away from him. It was. But it was also a bad thing because it left me without a father. But in all reality, I had been without a father all my life. And what you find is the court made us, the judge asked if we wanted visitation, and all four of us said absolutely not. My three sisters all said, we don't like him, we don't want to be around him. I was terrified of him. No. And they made us go to counseling. Remember that, Gina? Court-ordered counseling. And the court-ordered counselor asked me, well, why don't you love your father? And I said, well, would you like me to tell you some stories? And she said, yeah, please. So I started telling them. Well, I didn't get too far. She wanted to change the subject. In other words, there's a reason behind this. That's not what we're talking about, folks. It's not you're going to do what I say because I rule the roost. No. What's the number one priority a Christian parent ought to have for their children? That they come to know Christ. Isn't it? Well, they better be seeing Christ in you. If you're telling them one thing and doing the other, it ain't going to help, is it? Now, in Proverbs 13:24, he says, he that spareth his rod, look, a rod's a switch. He that spareth his rod hateth his son, but he that loveth him chasteneth him betimes. In other words, are you being nice by not spanking your child? And look, spanking covers a multitude of things. There's all different kinds of discipline in there. Look, there are some kids that you aren't going to get anywhere spanking. I mean, I'm just going to tell y'all, it just doesn't work. You can do it, and if they have a certain personality, they can take it, and it'll get worse and worse. And you can say, yeah, but the Bible says spank them. Well, the Bible says to chasten them, and you got to take the rod in a certain figure. I'll tell y'all point blank, it's far better to take away Sienna's sweets than to spank her. Is that the truth, Sienna?
Gotta admit it.
But I'll tell y'all what, spanking works on Gabriel.
My kids used to beg me, just spank us.
Yeah, just spank us. I would hold rather a good beating than somebody take away my food, you know. And I'm not saying we're starving. I'm just telling you that it's exercising discipline. You do it in love, don't you? Let's flip over and let's read Ephesians 6. And let's see what Paul says about this. In Ephesians 6:1 he says, children, obey your parents in the Lord, for this is right. Honor thy father and mother, which is the first commandment with promise, that it may be well with thee, and that thou mayest live long on the earth. Ye fathers, provoke not your children to wrath, but bring them up in the nurture and admonition of the Lord. Servants, be obedient to them that are your masters according to the flesh, with fear and trembling, and singleness of your heart as unto Christ. Not with eye service, that means don't just do it when they're watching, as men pleasers, but as the servants of Christ, doing the will of God from the heart, with good will doing service as to the Lord and not to men, knowing that whatsoever good thing any man doeth, the same shall he receive of the Lord, whether you be bond or free, and ye masters, do the same things unto them, forbearing threatening, knowing that your master also is in heaven, which neither is there respect of persons with him. Now he's again dealing with the child-parent relationship and the slave-master. Let's get rid of the slave-master for a second. We have no right whatsoever to just say, well, that's the modern-day employer. That's not an equal. That doesn't translate equally. A slave was owned by the person, okay? It was not slavery like we had in our country. In Israel, the Hebrews were supposed to be limited to 6 years of servitude and then they'd be set free. Now, they did not always honor that, but what we're talking about here is literally one person owning another and being responsible for them. And there was that relationship in the world then. And in Rome, about half the citizens of Rome had been enslaved by the Roman Empire. And Paul said, if you're saved being a slave, remain a slave. He said to Philemon, after Onesimus had gotten saved, he said, well, now you need to be treating him like a brother. He didn't tell him you got to let him go, but he suggested it, didn't he? I'll just say this. The only thing that has ever cured slavery is Christianity. Only thing that ever did away with it. What caused Christianity to go away, or what caused slavery to go away in the Roman Empire? Christianity. What caused slavery to go away in England? William Wilberforce. Christians. What caused it to go away in our country? People say, well, Abraham Lincoln did. No, Abraham Lincoln was a politician, and politicians do what's best for them, don't they? I don't want to offend anybody, but read both sides of history and you'll find out. Certain things become unacceptable to a society when that society has been molded into Christianity. Doesn't mean everybody's saved, but when the gospel comes to town and people begin to believe it, it immediately affects their family and their house, doesn't it? And that affects the way the next generation thinks, and soon what happens? Society starts to change, doesn't it? So we don't really need to spend much time with that today, because you don't know anyone today that is a slave to another master. Now in other countries there are, but not in our country. I know people use that language and it's stupid to use it. You don't know anyone in that position. Now we know people that are enslaved to drugs, don't we? We know people that are enslaved to alcohol, but that's not the issue here. The issue or the consequence between an employer and an employee, you've never met an employee that can't walk off the job. In fact, employees today, it's upside down, have more power than the employer a lot of times, don't they? So I don't want to spend much time with that at all, because I don't feel like it's even needed in our society, okay? But let's deal with the children. Number one, Paul's context here. Go back to chapter 4, where all of this started. He said, I therefore, the prisoner of the Lord, beseech you that you walk worthy of the vocation wherewith you are called. This is how he started applying the practice, didn't he? And what's he tell us to do? We need to walk according to the calling we've received. The calling as what? Christians. We need to practice what we believe, don't we? Notice what he says in chapter 5, verse 1. Be you therefore followers of God as dear children. It's saying you need to imitate the example. Christ has given us an example. In other words, he's calling us to act a certain way, isn't he? Notice where this particular context in this subsection started, verse 21. Submitting yourselves one to another in the fear of God. And you remember he started with, in the house, the husband and wife, didn't he? And we talked about that relationship. But the husband and wife relationship doesn't end it. What comes next? Children and parents. Now let's start on with this. The children and the parents. All right, I got 7 principles that I think we can get out of this text. And let's just deal with them one at a time, okay? The first principle is this. True discipline can only take place in right relationship to Christ. Okay? Now, everybody's called on to raise their children properly. And even lost people correct their children and raise them and teach them morals, don't they? But that's not what we're talking about. Notice verse 1. Children, obey your parents in the Lord. We're talking about something completely different. What is the goal of worldly parenting? That the child stay out of prison, be happy, and be acceptable in society, and lots of times that the child just not bring shame on the parent's name. Hadn't we all been guilty of that? Hey, you better act like that. Hey, he doesn't normally do this, you know. No, that's not the reason. What's the goal behind Christian parenting? That this child grows up to know the Lord. Okay, that's the goal. So we're dealing with something totally different. Now, notice that Paul addresses children directly. Remember, this was an epistle. It was delivered to the Asia Minor area and circulated around. And so where would it be read at? In the assembly. And notice what he says in verse 1. Children, obey your parents. He didn't say, parents, go home and tell your children. What does that tell us? He knew that they were in the assembly. From the beginning, he knew children were in the assembly. They've always been there, okay? So he addresses them directly. They're in covenant assembly. He then assumes that they'll be present for the reading, doesn't he? And first thing he does is he says, our love of God has got to come first. Will anyone raise their kids in the right way if the love of God is not the motivation? You can raise your kids in love. Everybody a normal parent has love for their children, okay? But we're talking about love for the child that comes below love of Christ. So let's put them up here in order. I'm going to draw a house. Okay? Who is the head? We're going to call this the house of faith. Now, I don't mean as the church is called the household of faith and the household of God. I mean this literally, that this is a house where the parents are believers, right? Who ultimately comes first in this house? Christ. So everything that we do is supposed to be in subordination to Christ. So everything we do, if you ask me, why are you doing that? First and foremost, what ought to be my answer? Christ, right? Now, when we get into the house, we find out that the husband is the head of the house. And that's not to rule and reign and dominate, no. It's to be the head of the house the same way that Christ is the head of the house. And how is Christ the head of the house? Sacrificial love. So the husband then is called on, first and foremost, not to dominate, but to be responsible, isn't he? You remember in the Old Testament, before the law came, before Abraham, well, in Abraham's day too, but they had the patriarch system, didn't they? And what was each firstborn child? He was the heir and the head of the family. And what was he responsible to do? Teach them the things of God and make sacrifice for them. Well, in the house, the husband has that position. I don't mean that you're supposed to be going and making sacrifices, but what's your first job where your children are concerned? Teach them about the sacrifice of Christ. That's our first job. And everything we do comes with that in mind, doesn't it? Now, next comes the wife. Look, I'm going to put the wife I'm going to put her like this, okay? Because I don't want to get you this idea that there's the husband and then down here's the wife. No, the husband and the wife work together as a team, don't they? And ultimately what the husband is, does the husband have the final say-so? In a sense, yes, but in a sense, no. You discuss everything, don't you? That's why he says, look, come to the verse that it says, children, obey your parents. Parents, what's that assuming? Plural. The two working together, right? Now, even if you're in a situation where one's saved and one's not, you can still influence the one that's not with your decisions and explain why you want to do it. Folks, lots of times it's that explanation and that thing that causes the other person to come under conviction. But husband and wife, and then come the children. And what has Paul already commanded the husband to do? To show sacrificial love towards the wife, right? Then what is the husband and the wife to show to the children? Sacrificial love. What does sacrificial love look like? Not putting yourself first. I'll tell you, it looks like a lot of things. It's playing Yahtzee when you'd rather do nothing, right? What it comes down to is you want to make sure that you have an influence on that child so that you can influence that child towards correct decisions where Christ is concerned. And the best way to influence the child is by letting them see what you do. If the child sees you, it's kind of funny if we go out to eat. We're like everybody else. We don't go out to eat much anymore, do we? Y'all know what I mean? It's ridiculous. But if you go out to eat, and the food starts coming, I know when the food gets close because I'll see Gabriel do this. What's he doing? Well, where'd he learn that from? You. From me and Lexi, right? Matter of fact, sometimes Sienna will tell him, here, hey, we got to thank the Lord because he wants to start eating. In other words, we lead by example. Now, can't we all agree that we have failed at this, most of us, haven't we? I certainly have, and I'm thankful again that the Lord let me get way into life before He gave me kids, literally, but you can't undo what's already been done. But what we can do is we can, from this point forward, say, okay, this is what needs to be done, because your children will be influenced by you the rest of their life, whether you know it or not, okay? Now, he says again, children, obey your parents. That's two, isn't it? What's the great epidemic in our country? One. Look, I've got statistics from y'all. I don't want these statistics to offend anyone, but they were so overwhelming to me that I thought, hey, we need to talk about this, okay? This was from 2009. In 2009, 50% of white children were without a father to raise them in the home. Okay? 50%. 60% in 2009 of Hispanic children were without a father to raise them in the home. 80% of black children, no father to raise them in the home. Now, turn on the news. If you live in Mobile, every night on the news there's a shooting, isn't there? About 80% of it is black kids, isn't it? I'm not trying to offend anybody. I mean, look, Bobby will tell you, hey, you got to be careful. Why? Me and you need to have compassion. I'm guilty of this, not understanding. You know what they're doing? They're doing what they learn to do. That's what they're doing. How about DUIs? I look at who was arrested every day because I'm guilty of wanting to gossip. I want to look and just see if any of my old friends were arrested. I look in Mobile and I look in Jackson County. You know what about 60% of the DUIs are? Hispanics. They're flooding in and they're getting DUIs constant. I see it all the time. I'm not saying that a married kid can't get a DUI. I'm just telling y'all. You say, well, that's good. No, whites are just as guilty. Look, a white granddaughter here a week ago in Irvington, of all places, Bridget knows, beat her grandma to death with a rubber mallet. Her grandma who was raising her beat her to death. How many grandparents do y'all know raising grandchildren? Lots of them. Why are things this way? Because we turned from God. We as a people turned from God, and therefore we turned from godly parenting, and that led to, you see how it goes? It's like my yard out there. In 2 or 3 years, I'm going to have the most beautiful crop of dollar weed in all of Grand Bay because I'm not doing anything about it. And I practically don't plan on doing anything about it. Hey, the point being is this is what happens. Folks, that's staggering to me, isn't it to y'all? I mean, imagine 80% of black kids grow up with no father in the house. And again, what about the other 20%? They probably don't have a decent father, most of them. We have 50% of white kids grew up without a father. Me and Gina had one, and we were better when we didn't, weren't we? The whole society's upside down. We can't just point our finger at anybody. What's the reason? Because Christ isn't the head of the house. That's it. It's sinners being let go to do what they do. It's a mark of a pagan society. Hey, let me prove that to y'all. Go over to 1 Timothy. I tell you, go to Romans 1 first. We'll just use this one and we'll come back to the other one. In Romans 1, Paul's talking about a group of people that have been given over by God. And y'all know what it looks like. Verse 29, being filled with all unrighteousness, fornication, wickedness, covetousness, maliciousness, full of envy, murder, debate, deceit, malignity, whispers. Doesn't that sound like the nightly news? Yeah. Now read on. Backbiters, haters of God, despiteful, proud, boasters, inventors of evil things, disobedient to parents. Disobedience to parents then is a mark of a pagan society. Do we have it? Yeah, we've got it. We've got it because we're raising our kids in the pagan manner. And what's the pagan manner? Self first. And what would you say is the thing that's driven into our kids more than anything else today? I'll tell you what I was learned. I was learned that the two most important things in life were money and women. That's what I was taught. And so I became a teenager, and guess what my two goals in life were? Money and women.
The new big catchphrase on Facebook, living your best life.
Living your best life, isn't it? I have a family member that I pray for all the time, and it breaks my heart because more and more I'm watching them and there was a time there when they were like right at it, and now they're constantly kids aren't in it, they're gone. Lexi, we're looking at 3 or 4 in a row of showing that they're having a good time because they're all together, and what do they got to show the camera, every one of them? Their beer. Folks, if you want to drink a beer, but do you have to celebrate it? I mean, it's kind of silly, isn't it? We're being told that that's a good time. You can have a good time drinking a beer if you want, but you don't need to say, I'm living the best life now, look. It's crazy. You know where that person ought to be? At home with their kids. They ought to be where my dad should have been. My dad would come home from work, and he worked very hard. When he got home from work, he'd take a shower, and I had to polish his shoes and clean his truck, and Gina had to do his hair so he could go out and chase women all night. I'm not exaggerating. I'm not asking you to feel sorry for us. I'm just telling you that's how pagans live, and it's how pagans raise their children. And so that's how we were raised. And you talk to people, I don't care how old you are, the mistakes that a parent makes, you deal with them the rest of your life. You do. That's just the truth, isn't it? Okay, now, back over to Ephesians chapter 6. Y'all hear me talk about Sabrina all the time. Many of y'all have met Sabrina and Roy. Hey, two of the funnest people in the world to be around, aren't they? Especially when they get going with each other. It's great. But Gina used to come home so jealous of Sabrina's life because Sabrina had a dad. He had 5 girls, dad that was raising them. Gina said they would come down with their going to go out clothes, and he'd say, up, just a minute, get in here. And she'd come in there and look at what she's dressed. He'd say, if you can't wear it in front of Jesus, you can't wear it. Get back up there and change it. He was parenting. He was showing them love. Do y'all know how they talk about their father? Totally different. And you can see that parenting, I only know 2 of them, but you can see it in them, can't you? Kids are great imitators of what they see, aren't they? It's responsibility in the house. It's not the kid, it's Christ. If you put Christ first, the kids see that, don't they? If you tell the kids to put Christ first, kids pick up on a hypocrite quick, okay? Now, in imitating, we're told in chapter 4 or chapter 5 verse 1, be imitators or followers of God. But you and I have got to do that so that the children imitate us. Y'all know kids are great imitators, aren't they? Hey, I told y'all growing up, me and Gina played barroom. We would sit at the bar, and I was Sam, and she was whoever, and I'd pour her we'd take 7-Up and root beer and mix them all together and put an olive in it, and she'd act drunk, and I'd act drunk. That's how we were raised. What were we doing?
What we saw.
Imitating. Yeah. I'll go out in the shop to work on something, and here comes Gabriel. He'll come out. If I've got my apron on, he wants his apron. He puts on everything. He comes over. When I'm working on something, I'm building something now for Nina. And I'm standing there, I'm looking at how to figure it out. And I look next to me, and guess what he's doing? He's standing there doing this. Kids just imitate, don't they? We do. Well, who as parents are we supposed to imitate? Christ. And what's the greatest attribute of Christ to be imitated? Sacrificial love. Folks, it takes sacrifice to raise kids, doesn't it? I mean, everybody in here knows the money it takes to raise kids, the time, the aggravation, the explaining. I have explained the exact same thing to Sienna 5,000 times. And you know what? I've still got a couple thousand to go, I know. Because repetition, right? But let me ask y'all, how many times do you and I have to learn the same doctrines over and over and over? Aren't you glad Christ shows us patience? Then what do we do with our children? Patience, okay? All right, the only way we're going to be able to do this is if we understand our relationship to God. Look, if you have all right, husband and wife, if the wife is not secure in her relationship to her husband, is she going to show security towards her children? Then if the husband is not secure in his relationship to Christ, is he going to be secure in his relationship to his wife? It goes from the top down, doesn't it? And you know, there's nothing better than knowing. Hey, like Lexi knows one thing. She's stuck with me. We ain't going anywhere. You know, no matter what comes to pass, this is it, right? There's great security in that, isn't there? There's great security in that. Well, what about a child? Folks, the worst thing that a parent can do is to put a guilt trip on a child and threaten him with insecurity. Like they could possibly lose, and it happens all the time. I was told growing up all the time, I brought you into this world, I'll take you out. I was told that all the time. Literally till I was 14, I thought he was going to kill me. And when we got away, Gina will tell you, every night we were constantly looking out the window in the middle of the night because we think we heard something, huh, Gina? It's a horrible way to raise a kid. But you know, it's no different than raising a kid that they are scared they might lose your love if they do something wrong. When you chastise or correct a kid, what's one of the things you got to do it in? Love and security. I tell Sienna, you know, all the time, you ain't going anywhere. You know, she's got to the point now that she's telling me I ain't going anywhere. Right? Why? Because you've got to instill that security to them, don't you? Y'all know in divorce cases a lot of times what kids hear? You want to go live with so-and-so? I mean, the kids hear that. I tell you what, if you don't like it around here, you can go live with so-and-so. Folks, a child doesn't need to hear that.
Matter of fact, the kids are used
As pawns, they sure are. They're used as currency. And I'll tell y'all something else. Drug addicts have learned to have kids because they use them as currency. Drug addicts know exactly how to use a kid to get what they want. They care nothing about the kid. They just know if they've got that kid, that's a means to get something from. And it's a horrible situation. And yet we're all guilty of this because as a society, we're all part of it, aren't we? We've totally ruined the whole. Can't y'all see how we got in this condition? This is so important that Paul spends literally a full chapter on these relationships, doesn't he? All right, let's get to the second point. The second point is this. Our spousal relationship comes before our parenting relationship. Y'all know that surprises a lot of people. A lot of people think today that the kids are more important than anything, but they're not. Do y'all know what the Bible says kids are? A gift from God. And how long will you have them? Till they grow up and go away and get married, and then they become more important to someone else than they are. Then that relationship's going to survive. In other words, children are a gift given to us, but what are we given to do with them? We're responsible to raise them and prepare them. Our first responsibility is prepare them to know the Lord. I wish all y'all would start watching Little House on the Prairie. Man, I would give anything to have had. What an incredible dad he was, wasn't he? I was watching the Golden Girls one time. My mom loved the Golden Girls, and that one was talking about her upbringing, and it was so wonderful, you know, and the other one said, oh, who raised you, Michael Landon? Because people recognize that, don't they? But y'all know, me and Sienna were just laughing. He thought some older boy was fooling with Laura, and the door opened, and boy, Michael Landon popped him, didn't he, Sienna? And he come running in and grabbed him up again and popped him again. Well, that's the guy she wound up marrying. What did that guy know from the beginning? I better be dealing in the right. And I'm not suggesting you go out and hit your kid's, mate. But what I'm just telling y'all is being raised in the proper manner has a huge effect, doesn't it? This is how we ensure that the next crop brings a harvest. And yet, what have most of us done? We've not spent no time on the crop. We're letting the dollar weeds run in. It takes a lot of time and effort, doesn't it? Look, I'm guilty lots of times of not spending the time I ought to spend with my kids because I, self, want to do something. Aren't we all guilty of that? We need to sacrifice. We need to realize this is important. I know one thing, the day will come when I'm going to wish I had Sienna here to play Yahtzee with. I know that. There's nothing wrong. I love beating her at Yahtzee. I am the Yahtzee Nazi, okay? But the point being is I don't like playing Yahtzee. Be honest with y'all, it's kind of irritating. But I like spending time with her. Y'all know what I mean. Gabriel would love nothing else than for me to go say, I'm going to take a nap and sit in that chair, and here he comes running in there with his yarn to sneak in and tie me all up. And I wake up with my feet completely tied up, and he'll do it all day long, won't he, Sienna? He's nuts about it. He's not nuts about that. What's he really like? You're giving him attention and spending time with him. Okay? Now, how are you and I to mimic that? Spending time with the Lord. How do we spend time with the Lord? In His Word and in prayer. And so the relationships, there's a balance there. Okay, so our spousal relationship comes before our parenting. Again, Paul assumes parents in verse 1. He doesn't assume anybody's single, okay? Kids learn best by example. And if they see that we don't put our spouse first, they won't think that the relationship's right. Look, if you don't make sacrifices for your spouse, then what makes your kids think that, you're not showing that love? One thing I hope our kids know, I never just asked, but Sienna, do you think I love Lexi? How do you know that?
Sacrifice.
You see it, don't you? Don't y'all know? You can see when a husband loves his wife. You can see it, can't you? You can see when there's that idea that this person and I together are in something, aren't we? And we're in it for the long haul. And our first responsibility is to Christ, but our second responsibility is our kids. Immediately, that's the order, okay? All right, I'm not to sacrifice the love of my spouse for the love of a child. Y'all know how many husbands would say the wife loves the kids more than they love them? That's not right. You need to love those kids, but not more than the husband, and the husband don't need to love the kids more than the wife. Me and Gina have friends, and Tony, Aaron and Chrissy. I can just tell, I've only met their kids a few times, but I can tell being around them that they gave their kids a real good upbringing, can't you? Yeah. You know what Aaron said to me the other night? You don't hear something like this often. They've moved to St. Louis, and it was the last class we're going to be together. They've been coming for a few years. And he said, well, I'm really going to miss this. He said, I'm think back to when I first came. Chrissy started coming and asked me to come. He said, and I was tired, and I really didn't, want to after work. He said, but my first thought was, well, it can't be bad. It's the Word of God, and after all, it's 30 minutes there and 30 minutes back. That's an hour I get to spend in the car with Chrissy. Well, that really hit me there. You see what that is? I've told y'all many times, one of the greatest sacrifices for me having children is me and Lexi aren't together every waking minute. We used to be together every waking second. Everywhere I went, she was there. But we had to give that up. I don't like that, but I know that that's the way it needs to be. But what Aaron was telling me was his wife is a part of him, isn't he? Now, what's causing that? A right understanding of his relationship to Christ with both of them. It's all balanced, and it all works this way. I know most of us in here are past the age of bringing up kids, but still, it'll tell you the relationship between the parent and the child is to mirror the relationship between Christ and us. How much patience and sacrifice does Christ show you? Folks, I have been the recipient of the world's greatest long-suffering, me. Then what do I need to be? Long-suffering to others. Okay? All right, a third thing. We must accept our responsibility in God's order. In other words, we don't fight and rebel against it. What's the child's responsibility? Verse 1, children, obey. Point blank, children, obey. Now, it doesn't get any further than that. Then what's the child's job? Sienna, let's hear it. What's your job?
Obey.
Obey. Now, notice what he says next. Obey in the Lord. Everybody see that? Obey why? Because God said so. God said it's right and proper. Y'all go to Colossians 3. In Colossians 3, Paul says, children, obey your parents in all things, for this is well-pleasing unto the Lord. Then what's the first reason the child needs to learn to obey the parents? It pleases God. Yeah, it pleases God. So when you tell your child to do something, the very first reason they need to be learning to do it, even when they don't understand, they need to be doing it. Why? This is what God said. In other words, you're teaching a child that what God said is right, isn't it? Always. Hey, flip back over to Ephesians and watch Paul drives this home. He says, children, obey your parents in the Lord, for this is right. Y'all see what that means? This is righteous. He says, this is just, this is the way it ought to be according to God. If God says it's the way it ought to be, is that final? Yeah. Notice what he says next. Honor thy father and mother, which is the first commandment with promise. In other words, how do you know that it's righteous to obey your parents? Because the law of God says so. Well, if God's law says so, is it right? Yes. But notice the word honor. He doesn't just say obey. Lots of obedience is grudgingly, isn't it? It's why me and Dina don't like the eye roll. What does the eye roll say?
Disrespect.
Yeah. Dina, what's it tell you? I'm going to do it, but it's disrespectful. Well, honor means don't do it that way. Honor means even when you don't understand it, just do it. Look, your child has got to believe at the end of the day that what you're telling them to do, you're telling them to do because you believe it's in their best interest. Right? So the eye roll, get rid of the eye roll. I hate it. That's the worst to me. The two worst things the kid can do to me is roll the eyes or lie to me. I tell Sienna all the time, you tell me the truth, you're never going to be in that so bad, you're never going anywhere, and trouble's not going to be that bad. But when they lie to you, what does it do? It crushes the relationship because you can't trust them. And how do you feel when you can't trust them? Now things start to, right? So don't do that. And you say, well, do you ever lie to Christ? And then I sit back and look in the mirror and I feel about that big. There've been times when I say, Lord, I'd like to pray for another 10 minutes, but I'm tired. Why? Why are we this way? We're sinners. So why I hate the eye roll, I understand the eye roll. I mean, I used to call my dad things that we all know what I'm talking about, don't we? But he says, honor them. And when you do someone a service in honor, what does it involve? You're doing it because you want to. You may not want to do the task, but you want to honor the person, don't you? Look, there was nothing that my granny could ask me to do that I wouldn't do. Period. Now, number one, I would do it because I was scared of the repercussions. But number two, even later in life, if she called me and said she needed anything, I'd stop what I was doing and go. Do you know what caused me to feel that way? All the love she showed me in sacrifice. I saw a lot of sacrifice from her. She got grandkids dumped on her, and look, my mom was doing the best she could, working and trying and all, but my granny sure picked up the slack, didn't she, Gina? And all of us four, would do anything for her. Y'all, if you're raised out, Dina, you know about a grandparent like this, don't you? Well, it takes a lot of work to do this, and yet Paul's commanding us to do it. All right. Notice he says, this is right. That's the fifth commandment. It's the fifth commandment, by the way, with promise. What's that mean, the fifth commandment with promise? Hey, hold your hand here and go to Exodus 20. In Exodus 20, verse 12, he says, honor thy father and thy mother, that thy days may be long upon the land which the Lord thy God giveth thee. Now, this does not mean that if you honor your parents, you're protected from disease. That a saint that honors his parents won't die at young or be kid, doesn't mean that. This was commanded to the people of Israel. And in general, what was the command? Obey God and things will go well with you. Turn from God and what happens? Cursing. Now watch how Paul adapts this just a little bit for the individual. Go back to Ephesians 6. Verse 2. Honor thy father and mother, which is the first commandment with promise, that it may be well with thee, and that thou mayest live long on the earth. You notice he didn't talk about abiding in the land a long time, but that thou mayest live long upon the earth. That's just rephrasing it to say this way. There's blessing in doing this. It's good for you. Can everybody remember? Harvard Law School did a study, and I was reading the results of this in a commentary, and he was talking about this study they did amongst prison inmates. And they listed two-word descriptions of their home life. And they had like 10 choices. And they were like brutal and non-existent, right? Harsh and cruel. Mediocre, and they just went down the list. Some of them were, just friendly and my buddy, you know what I mean? But the last one was caring and giving, right? And of all the inmates they did, I think it was 230, not a single one checked off caring and giving. Now, I know you would say, well, that's their own bitter attitude. Don't y'all think that tells us something? A lot of us are the product of our upbringing. We're all sinners, but if sin is not curtailed, what happens? Y'all know what happens. Look at the news every night. I guarantee you when I read the news today, somebody shot somebody in Mobile last night. It happens every night, doesn't it? And so what he's basically telling us is we're a lot of our upbringing has an effect on our life, doesn't it? And so when he says that it may be well with thee, do y'all remember the people you went to school with that had no discipline? I do. I was jealous of friends that had no discipline, right? Guess where I see one at all the time now? On my Jackson County arrest record. Every few weeks he's on there. I showed Gina's husband Mark because his older brother Mark knew. And Mark said, yep, I knew, and I see them too on there all the time. I'm not saying that they're not getting what they deserve. What I'm telling you is that what happened? They weren't shown. What he's basically saying here is if you do this, life goes a lot better, doesn't it? Isn't life a lot better if we honor our parents than likewise? I mean, really, it's a lot better, isn't it? Okay? Now that it may be well with thee, it's good for you, and that you might live long on the earth. Disobedience to parents, like divorce, is a mark of a pagan society. It just flat out is, okay? Disobedience to authority, crime, all of that is a result of a falling society, isn't it? I mean, y'all look at the crimes that are committed today. We hear about things today that we never even heard about growing up, don't we? And you know, it might have happened, but it wasn't happening this regular. Well, what's going on? God has given us over as a society. Given us over to what? To self, to our own sinful desires. And so without them being checked like they normally are, what happens? This happens. Y'all see it. I mean, this is not the first time that's happened. Read the fall of the Roman Empire. What was life like in the Roman Empire? Brutal. This is how societies go. Y'all know as it goes right now, we're about 10, 12 years behind Europe. Read about Europe and London. They don't have as many shootings as we have because they don't have as many guns, but read about how things are going over there. It's horrible, isn't it? And unless God steps in and there's revival, it won't get any better. Society's just going to keep going that way. Okay? All right, y'all flip over to 1 Timothy chapter 1. A friend that watches classes told me the last month's been mighty depressing. I said, well, I'm awful sorry, but we're into the practice, you know. It ain't always going to be fun, is it? All right. In 1 Timothy 1, Timothy says in verse 8, we know that the law is good if a man use it lawfully, knowing this, that the law is not made for a righteous man, but for the lawless and disobedient, for the ungodly and for sinners, for unholy and profane, for murderers of fathers and mothers, and for manslayers, for whoremongers, and he goes on and on. What's he saying? The law is given to curtail sin, isn't it? Well, when a people turn from God and God quits curtailing the sin as he did before, he quits restraining it, what do the people do? They take a head down into the deep with it. And we're watching it happen. Go to 2 Timothy. In 2 Timothy chapter 3, he says, this know also, that in the last days. Now, this particular reference to the last days is not just the church age. Many times the last days meant in the Jewish economy the age of the Messiah. Here he's referring to the latter days. The latter days of every society, but the latter days of mankind in general, he says. This know also that in the last days or latter days perilous times shall come. For men shall be lovers of their own selves, covetous, boastful, proud, blasphemers, disobedient to parents. It's a mark of society that's going downhill, isn't it? I mean, can we all agree that we're watching this happen? Then is any government inaction or any law going to change it? What's the only thing that can change it? People turning to God. Then why is it so important for me and you to raise our children this way? Because that's how things turn around. Y'all know how I get my yard turned around? I got to start doing something about the dollar weed, don't I? Little by little, if I start doing something about the dollar weed and start treating my other grass better, the other grass will grow up, but I'm not going to do that. So eventually I'll have dollar weed, won't I? Ken, what you got over there?
50-50.
50-50? Ken's...
A million of those things.
Yeah.
And I've pulled up millions of them.
Yeah. It's crazy, isn't it? But it's a good example of how society goes, and that's why the home is so important. Folks, y'all know all this starts in the home. The home, God gave us the family unit. It's designed by God, and God gave it to us because it's the proper way to raise children in the Lord, isn't it? Now, once that childhood is past, you say, well, what am I going to do now? Well, now you just try and carry on your home life in the Lord and have whatever effect you can have on your grown children in the Lord. Hey, we all still have an effect, don't we? And so what Paul's trying to tell us in all of these things to the Ephesians is, to be obedient, we've got to know our place in Christ, don't we? My first responsibility is to Christ. My next responsibility is to my wife, and my third responsibility is to my children. And the wife, it's just the opposite. What about the child? Where's the child's first responsibility? To the parent. You say, well, it ought to be to the Lord. When they come to know the Lord, it will be to the Lord. Until then, who's it to? To the parent. Y'all see how important that parent is? That parent is playing the part of the Lord until that child comes of age. I don't mean you are the Lord, but you're taking the responsibility for them, aren't you? Children are a blessing. They're given to us as temporary gifts, and they're not given to us to just enjoy. They're given to us to do something with, to raise them up for the Lord. Okay? All right, any questions? We got 3 more points we need to cover. We'll take a break and then we'll look at them, all right?